First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate Matthew and, of course, the British Parliamentary Committee for Iran Freedom for your status as a sanctioned organisation now. I think it's very indicative to all of us that your tireless endeavours have not gone unnoticed, least of all by the Iranian regime. So we thank you all for your support and your solidarity for our people's democratic aspirations. Since, of course, the savage beating to death of Mahsa Amini by Iran's notorious morality police, the Iranian people for 3 months now have taken to the streets in villages, towns, and cities, and in every province, the length and the width of our country. And they have united under one banner and one umbrella, and that is regime change. And that is regime change in its entirety, with absolutely no concessions for the Iranian people and, of course, by the Iranian people. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, that whilst this is, of course, a revolution that was led by women, it is absolutely not merely a matter of mandatory veiling, as many in the West will have you believe. Iranian women know all too well that mandatory veiling is one aspect of the demands of the Iranian people. But in fact, what the Iranian people want is democratic and a secular republic and a country in which the fundamental freedoms and human rights of all Iranians are not only respected, but are guaranteed under the law, irrespective of one's gender, race, religion, ethnic, or linguistic differences. And we, all of us, know all too well that that can only be achieved by regime change. I join others here and, of course, grieving the execution of Mohsen Shekari on the 8th of December, followed in a quick succession by the execution of Majid Reza Rahnavand on the 12th of December. We mourn with the Iranian people both of these losses. However, make no mistake that this is merely an attempt by the Iranian regime to silence the dissent of the Iranian people. It's an effort to silence the Iranian people, but also to instill fear in the families of the victims, in the community, and of course, society at large. But what we have witnessed over the course of the past 3 months is an indication of the will of the Iranian people. Not once have they surrendered to the tyranny and the oppression of the Iranian regime, and not once have they surrendered their aspirations for democratic regime change. And in fact, every individual that's been slayed by this regime has done nothing but to galvanize the Iranian people, 85 million of whom are living in a mass prison. As a member, it's lovely to see Dr. Tahir Bumedra here, because he and I were on the panel of experts that thoroughly investigated the 1988 massacre, where, as was mentioned earlier, by a decree of the then Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, conservative estimates say that over 30,000 political prisoners were executed, sent to the gallows, and perished. They were, of course, the vast majority of whom supporters, sympathizers, and members of the PMOI, otherwise known as the MEK. And I can tell you, as someone who spent a great deal of time researching this regime and all of its heinous human rights violations during the course of its inception in 1979, that the modus operandi of this regime has not changed and will not change. So we see, again, trying individuals in revolutionary courts with no due process of law, in sham courts, and of course in kangaroo courts, where there is absolutely no justice, least of all for political prisoners. The families of the victims are being prevented from grieving the loss of their family members, and of course are being prevented from meeting and gathering and protesting. This is the face of the Iranian regime, and this has always been the face of the Iranian regime. But unfortunately, the international community in the past, in my opinion, has turned its back on the Iranian people whilst it's lined its own pockets. Again, I speak in my personal capacity as an Iranian woman, but also as an Iranian exile, and as somebody who has had family members tortured, imprisoned, and executed by this regime, that had the international community acted prior to now, had they taken strong and robust measures, then perhaps we wouldn't see the numbers of people who have been unlawfully killed by this regime. And perhaps the people of Sistan and Baluchistan and Kurdistan wouldn't be under a consistent siege by this regime, massacres taking place daily. They are, of course, one of the primary victims of this regime. In terms of the numbers, I can tell you that in terms of the numbers, again, it's estimated that over 30,000 Iranians are currently being unlawfully detained. Over 700 freedom-loving Iranians have been unlawfully killed simply for daring to demand freedom, democracy, and a secular republic. Over 10% of all of those who have been killed are juveniles. However, as I said before, the Iranian people, as you can see from this and other uprisings, have never shied away from their desire to overthrow this tyrannical regime and to establish a secular democracy in our country, to rid the people of Iran, our neighboring countries, the people of the Middle East and the world of this evil. Ladies and gentlemen, the Iranian people have done their part and they continue to do their part in pursuit of their freedom. But it's now, in my opinion, not only incumbent on the international community, but it's their duty and their responsibility to act. And to be very clear, so that I'm not misconstrued, in no way am I suggesting the people of Iran do not desire and nor do they seek external interference in the internal affairs of our country in any way, shape, or form. However, what they also will not accept is what I call this delicate wagging of the finger at the Iranian regime. That simply won't cut it. Tyrants and oppressors, such as the Iranian regime, understand one thing and one thing only, and that's the language that all bullies understand. That's robust and firm measures. So whilst we welcome verbal condemnation by this government, by the international community, quite frankly, we've had 43 years of it. So what I'd like to see is concrete and decisive measures taken by this government in leading the way in terms of the international community. I think we need to encourage our allies, but also the Security Council and the European Union to take measures to assist the Iranian people in their fight for justice and freedom. Now, in terms of what can be done, I know it's been repeated several times this afternoon, but I don't think the message is getting through. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to run through what the Iranian people are asking for. First and foremost, shut the Iranian embassy in London. It's not a building that by any means consular or diplomatic activities are taking place. Absolutely not. Instead, it's a building that houses terrorists and murderers and spies. It is a building that is a direct threat to our democracy here in the United Kingdom. It's also a direct threat to our way of life in the United Kingdom, and of course, more importantly, our national security here in the United Kingdom. Expel Iran's diplomats and their families, and make sure that we do not allow the Iranian regime's agents to have a safe haven and to enjoy again our democracy. Second of all, expel Iran from its seat at the United Nations. This should be a privilege of nations and not indeed a right, certainly not one that the Iranian regime deserves. The fact that Iran is at the United Nations, but that the fact that Iran should have ever been and is on committees at the United Nations, including the Women's Rights Committee, is an insult to the Iranian people and also a stain on the reputation of the United Nations. Thirdly, as we've said, not only do I want to see Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, prescribed on the list of terrorist organizations, but we'd also like to see Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security also added to this list. So prescribe the IRGC and prescribe the Ministry of Intelligence. Fourthly, 43 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, the Iranian regime waged war on the Iranian people. For 43 years, the Iranian people have been fighting tyranny and oppression, the likes of which I think will be realized in time to come. And therefore, I ask the international community to recognize our people's right to resist tyranny. It is, of course, a right that's recognized in international law and is how liberation movements the world over have achieved their independence. Recognize the right of Iran's men and women and children to live in a free and a democratic republic, to free themselves from tyranny and oppression. As I said, 43 years ago, the Iranian regime waged war on the people, and we have the right to fight back. And finally, I would invite and implore anyone who hasn't done so to read Madame Rajavi's 10-point plan for a future Iran, which will give you an indication of what a free, a democratic, and a secular Iran can and will look like. Thank you so much, Matthew.